They call me a traitor, yet I know I am constant. Heretic. They have cried, yet I have seen the gods in a way they cannot. They have branded me a consorter with demons, yet in summoning the Neverborn, I have tasted truth. Though my body, mind, and soul now pay the price. I know the works of man are but crumbling buildings atop the dry and shifting sands of time. They will not last. They cannot. The northern winds are harsh, blowing straight from the bowels of hell. The weak foundations of civilization will not outlast them.
Greetings friends and welcome to the old world. I'm Lordigan and this is OnlyWar. We're going to delve into the origins and nature of magic in Warhammer Fantasy. We're going to look at how magic has entered the old world from ancient times through to the events of the Great Catastrophe, the creation of the Great Vortex of Ulthuan, and the leyline network of waystones and henges that draw away the pure energies of chaos that diffuse into the material realm. Although setting out the lore for those newer is the main goal, we'll briefly touch on a couple of influences behind the Warhammer setting, so hopefully a little something for everybody. Warhammer lore in both fantasy and 40k settings draw heavily on ideas from ancient and more modern religious theology, mythology and mysticism, either directly or through the works of others. Combining these with historical events and civilizations from our own history built the foundations of an incredibly rich and complex lore, laden with so many rabbit holes to be found, but I'll restrict the discussion of the nature and origin of magic to two. The first is well known, an author who received a dedication in the very early and very different days of the 1984 2nd edition rulebooks, to Michael Moorcock, whose fault it all is. Moorcock has an interesting relationship with Games Workshop, and particularly his Elric series is widely recognised in its influence in the Warhammer setting, particularly in terms of the nature of chaos. The second is this image. If you at first glance thought it might too come from those early days, I wouldn't be surprised. It's very similar to banners that appear in the Realm of Chaos books. But it's actually the Eight of Wands from the Thoth Tarot deck, first drawn between 1938 and 1943 under the instruction of English author and occultist Aleister Crowley. Crowley was one of, if not the, most influential figures both amongst occultists themselves and in popular culture. He links the Beatles to Terry Pratchett and Led Zeppelin to Adventure Time. Influences on Moorcock's work are also known and diverse, but one he denied was the use of the Eight of Wands as represented by Crowley in the development of his own eight-pointed symbol of chaos, represented in the Eternal Warrior and its subsequent sequels. An icon so familiar to us as Chaos Undivided in the Warhammer Fantasy and 40k settings. Moorcock claimed his symbol of chaos derived from a doodle of the eight-pointed mariner's compass rose, the directions on the compass being linked to the directions of the eight principal winds. In Moorcock's cosmology, there were two eternal forces at war in the universe, law and chaos. Between them is the balance, and each of these forces is served by champions and heroes. These ideas were fundamental to the idea of alignment in Dungeons & Dragons, but Games Workshop lent much more heavily into the concepts of chaos and its relationship to magic, as the mortal races of the old world struggle to hold off the inevitable encroachment of chaos. We'll start at the earliest point in the lore and the arrival of the Old Ones. They are recognised as a race of beings of immense scientific advancement and great psychic power, with a civilization predating the gods of chaos coalescing in the Immaterium. In their travels across the endless expanse of the universe, one planet caught their eye, for within it they saw a unique and boundless potential The Old Ones decreed that this world would have a central place in their unknowable plans, and stellar gates at either pole were created to allow easy access to this new colony. They reshaped it to better fit their needs, and even shifted the planet's orbit towards its warming sun. In time, the ice sheets on the planet retreated, and verdant forests soon grew to cover the newly revealed soils. The Old Ones created servants to tend to their needs. Thus was the first spawning of the Slan mage priests. Being of prodigious intellect, the Slan were believed to be the only beings able to withstand direct contact with the near omnipotent Old Ones and comprehend their teachings. It was the purpose of the Slan to guide the lesser races whose creation would soon follow. The Old Ones had encountered many primitive creatures, including those that would one day be transformed into the first elves, dwarves, and men. Powerful and far-sighted, the Old Ones could shape and mould these imperfect life forms to better suit their future purposes. They did encounter some creatures whose existence was incompatible with their plans, and the Saurus were created to eradicate those native races that needed to be removed. The Old Ones frequently used polar gateways to travel the cosmos, but in the meantime they created further spawnings of Slan to execute their plans. By the command of the Old Ones, the Slan established the rainforest temple cities in the region now known as Lustria. The Old Ones' instructions to the Slan were very specific as to the locations of these temple cities, and many other architectural wonders were constructed across the globe. Each one was raised up purposely to form a vital nexus in a world-spanning geomantic web, an interlinked matrix of natural earth energy. Each site was linked to the next, and the Old Ones were able to draw upon this vast reservoir of energy to manipulate untold devices and enchantments of great power. The Slan mage priests were also able to tap into the geomantic web, and with its energies they could wield magic of immense power and communicate telepathically over vast distances. All was not well with the world, however. Distressing signs began to manifest outside the gateways at the planet's poles. They were portals to another dimension, and it was from there that the trouble arose. In the swirling madness of that otherworldly realm, the void, the immaterium, malign intelligences awakened. The Old Ones were beings of order, and although they tapped into the energies of the realm beyond their portals, they had always struggled to contain that power. It is unknown when they first detected the impending disaster, or if they realized its magnitude, but having glimpsed some future portent, it is probable the races the Old Ones created were intended to fight against the denizens of the realm of chaos. After the Lizard Men, the first of the newly created races was the Elves. Cocooned in their idyllic isle of Ulthwan, the Elves were highly attuned to these flows of magic, although they were little more than children compared to the Old Ones. They learnt the lore of magic in the laps of the gods themselves. The dwarves soon followed, although their magic was insular and intrinsic to their craftsmanship, and will be discussed another time. As the pressures of their cosmic war intensified, the Old Ones created the prolific and adaptable race of man, and seemingly in haste, the halflings and the ogres were risen up from the lesser things that roamed the world. Outside of the Lizard Men, the Old Ones are only dimly remembered in the most ancient of elven legends. Whether it was directly through these Old Ones, or perhaps the ancient Slan that the Old Ones had tasked with mentoring the younger races, the primitive elves were taught how to perceive and draw upon the tightly controlled trickles of magic that leaked into the world through the Old Ones' etheric gateways. Those able to control and sculpt the winds of magic are careful to guard the truth of magic's true source, because they don't really know what causes magic. Those amongst the different orders who study the theories of magic believe there is no true universal laws within the ether. Everything within is subject to sudden, random, and extreme change. Yet when the ether's energy, or magic, leaks into the mortal world from beyond the northern wastes, it becomes bound by the laws of the mortal universe. What knowledge there is about the source of magic derives from Teclis and Finrir's teachings, and they explained that magic is not part of the mortal world at all. Rather, it is an intrusion, being the very paradoxical stuff of the void. They explained that magic has one ultimate source, the great beyond, that the most educated of their students, Volans being foremost amongst them, referred to as the Etherean, or the ether.
The ether, the immaterium, the warp, the void, the chaos realm, the underworld. Its names are as numerous as the cultures that spawned them, yet the place is the same. I tend to believe the dual nature of the mortal universe, being actual or physical reality, and the celestial, being unlimited possibility. The two opposites through whose interaction the entire process of reality is made possible. Without the catalyst of change, the mortal realm would be static, timeless matter that could not move or alter.
In Moorcroft's Elric series, his multiverse is an infinite series of concurrent, sometimes intertwined universes, between which the Eternal Champion acts to balance the metaphysical forces of law and chaos, and the lords of the higher worlds that act as deities for each. In Moorcroft's lore, a realm controlled by law alone becomes just as stagnant as one overrun by chaos. In the case of Chaos realms, because the state of constant change lacks meaning, and eventually all possibilities are exhausted. Returning back to the treatise into the nature of magic.
Upon the mortal realm, the potential for change from one state to another is locked within every single thing that exists. Yet within this realm, bound as it is by natural law, potential is limited amongst relatively specific lines. But magic can change all this. For magic by its very nature picks apart the natural laws of the mortal plane, and is the force of raw potential itself. With magic flowing through it, an acorn could grow and change into almost anything, as it is saturated with the momentum of boundless potential. Yet everything that enters and exists upon the mortal realm is surely bound to some degree by its laws and restrictions, even the broiling potential that is magic. As the wholly inexplicable forces of the ether seep into this world, loose purpose and form is somehow forced upon it, refracting it into the 8 distinct humours.
There are many conflicting theories amongst the different orders of magic as to why and how the random energies of the ether fall into reasonably consistent laws in the mortal world. Most agree that whatever and whenever the immaterial meets the material, some kind of hybrid of the two is created. When the raw metaphysical stuff of the ether leaks through the chaos gates, it becomes perceivable as the 8 separate aspects, the winds of magic to those with the appropriate senses. These are not literal winds, rather they are made up of the immaterial substance of magic, dispersed at different speeds and in different amounts. Each aspect of this refracted magic has an associated colour and is drawn to different things in different ways. Just as the emblem of chaos has 8 arrows, so does magic have 8 winds. The raw magic that is unified within the realms of chaos, refracting into 8 coloured winds much like the different wavelengths of light through a prism. The symbol of chaos in Moorcock's mythos is an 8-pointed star, representing all possibilities and potentials. The sign of chaos flashed on their sails, 8 amber arrows radiating from a central hub, signifying the boast of chaos, that it contained all possibilities, whereas law was supposed, in time, to destroy the possibility and result in eternal stagnation. The sign of law was a single arrow pointing upwards, symbolizing direction and control. For both Moorcock's multiverse and the Warhammer world, the more chaos in a world, the more magic is present. The very similar 8-pointed star in Crowley's 8 of Wands are interpreted as the 8 sticks, which have turned themselves into neural oscillations. Crowley himself stated the sticks turning into electrical sparks, supporting or even creating matter with their vibrating energy. They stem from the struggle for freedom, which is inherent in all things related to thoughts, the urge to understand the true process of all things. The symbol of a 3-dimensional octagon, said to symbolize the intersecting points between the mundane square, the cube, and the divine circle, the sphere. But back to the old world. Aetherically sensitive people feel magic in slightly different ways, depending on the nature of their particular magical awareness. But regardless of the differences in personal experience, the association of specific colours is consistent among all traditions of arcane spellcraft. Hisht, the white wind, is the magic of light and all the abstract concepts that light can represent to mortals. It could be described as the magic of both illumination and enlightenment. It is also attracted to harmonious actions like chanting and singing, and similarities and connections between the hierophants of the Light Order and the priestly orders are many. More so than any of the other winds of magic, Hisht is intangible, diffuse, and all-permeating, making its lore and study one of the most complicated. It requires the total focus of will and an absolute determination of mind in order to channel and bind into a spell. Azur, the blue wind, is said to be a manifestation of the ether's reflection of inspiration and that which is out of reach. The magic of this wind is based upon the knowledge of the unknowable and the manipulation of the skies. This law of heavens, also known as astromancy, is practiced by the celestial order to divine the future and pluck through the strands of fate. Azur has few temporal boundaries and supposedly reaches into all the possible futures as readily as it floats across physical distances. After passing into the mortal realm, Azur is said to be drawn into the upper portions of the heavens, becoming a haze of eerie cloud. As the blue wind blows from the timeless realms of the ether across the distant sky, it can be sensed by the manner in which the permanent celestial bodies are distorted by the drifting cloud of Azur's temporally distorting blue light. Shaman, the yellow wind, is the manifestation of the etheric abstract and reality of logic, the desire to quantify, the desire and need to learn and implement learning. The magic of Shaman is alchemy, the art and science of transmutation, creation, and investigation. It's the wind of logic and experimentation. Shaman is supposedly attracted to dense material, particularly metals, the reason why gold and lead are so often used in magical experiments, one to conduct and the other to insulate. Kairan, the green wind, is ether's momentum towards growth and the need to nourish and be nourished. Gairan is ether's echo and the mirror of fertility and the nurturing aspects of mortal life. This brimming energy has granted the spells of Gairan their title as the law of life, wielded by jade wizards known by the common folk as druids. Gairan is said to fall down upon the mortal world in a manner similar to rainfall. Those able to see Gairan say it forms into pools and swirling eddies of green magic that gradually form into rivers flowing across the land like water, although unbound by our physical laws. Its energy saturates the earth with its life-giving power, It is drawn up through the roots of plants, feeding all living things and encouraging growth. Gur, the brown wind, is the ether's wild and bestial spirit. Gaia is used by feral amber wizards to shape spells of beastcraft and communion. In strange shamanistic rites, they call upon Gur into their bodies, allowing it to shape them into wolves and ravens, clawed savages, and gentle horse whisperers. It is known as the savage wind, the antithesis of civilization and domestication, as primal and unreasoning as it is devoid of malice. Nature red in tooth and claw. Gur is attracted to animals and wild places in equal measure, for the wild mountains and moors is where the wind of Gur blows free. Akwishi, the red wind, is Ether's fusion of the experience and notion of passion in its wildest possible sense. Akwishi tears across the world as a searing wind, attracted to passion, argument, excitement, and vehemence. In fact, any who are experiencing any kind of heat, emotional, physical, or both. Akwishi also holds dominion over hot emotions, brashness, courage, enthusiasm, aggression. The pyromantic spells of Akwishi, known as the Law of Fire, are amongst the most powerful and direct spells known to human mages. Bolts of flame, blades of fire, and terrible infernos all lie within the power of a wizard of Akwishi, or a bright wizard. Ulgu, the grey wind, is Ether's reflection of and reaction to the experience of being lost or confused. It is the wind full of unseen depths, plots, shadows, and illusion. Ulgu appears as a thick, impenetrable fog rolling across the earth, invoking a sense of mistrust and confusion in ordinary folk who pass through it. Ulgu is drawn to the natural mists and fogs of the mortal world, where it hangs upon the quiet chill of the air, wrapped in smoky shadows. Ulgu is also drawn to deceptions, mystery, and illusions. Grey wizards weave Ulgu into elaborate spells that wreathe them in its mysterious presence. This law of shadows contains spells of darkness, invisibility, shadowy death, and panicked bewilderment. Shaiish, the purple wind, is the ether's manifestation of the passage of time and the certainty of endings and death. Shaiish is not just an immaterial mirror to the trepidation in the face of unknown, but it is the embodiment of reverence and respect, of the aura that mortals project onto those things they consider sacred. Shaiish is formed by the realization of the transience of life, of memories of days gone by, and mortal acceptance of the day that is currently lived, and longing for days to come. Indeed, Shaiish is a murky place where all these concepts meet. It blows from the past, because the past has ended and gone, through the present, because endings and the expectation of death are intrinsic parts of living life, and into the future, for the future leads to that inevitability. Some have equated Shaiish with destiny, for it doesn't control what it was, is, or shall be. Instead, it permeates and reflects these things with absolute intimacy. Shaiish blows strongest where death must be faced, or endings take place, drawn to battlefields where men must embrace or submit to their deaths, and hangs in the silence of graveyards, where mourners gather in longing or remembrance. The ancient Slan mage priests and the lore masters of Ulthuan have mastered the art of grasping and refining the separate winds of magic, and weaving them so finely and so carefully that they can create spells of flawless and massively powerful effect. This balancing and precisely measured use of the winds of magic is Kwaesh, or high magic. Spells woven using Kwaesh use the elements of many or all of the winds of magic at once. High magic is far more versatile than all the other forms of magic, and spells woven from it are certainly amongst the most powerful, as well as being amongst the most difficult to cast. The Slann were created by the Old Ones with prodigious intelligence and magical aptitude. They were capable not only of harnessing the trickles of chaotic energies coming from the polar gates of their creators, but also able to tap into the geomantic web to further augment their power. The ancient elven civilization on the magical Isle of Ulthuan were mentored in their early magical emergence, either by the Old Ones directly, or more likely by the ancient Slann, acting as godlike intermediaries. While Moorcroft claimed the 8 winds of the Mariner's compass rose influenced his chaos symbol, in Crowley's 8 of Wands, above its own 8-pointed star, the rainbow is said to represent the spirit of fire. But the ethereal, invisible aspect of pure fire, where all gross material aspects are removed, energy is in its most exalted state, and suggests a current, or pure light, hence all the rainbows of colours shown. Therefore fire is no longer conjoined with the ideas of combustion and incineration, like the red wind Akrishi, but much more like Qiesh and the practice of high magic. The number 8 also refers to Hod, the 8th Seraphoth, which is the splendour of electricity, speech and light. And in Crowley's version, the 8 light wands have been turned into electrical bolts, said to be sustaining or even constituting the vibrational energy of physical matter. When the Old One's civilization finally came to an end, so too did the safeguards they had created to keep apart the raw, transmuting energy of chaos and the certainties of the mortal plane. With their passing arose the purposes and powers of chaos. The gates crashed down upon the world, and simultaneously the poles of the world imploded, opening rifts into the beyond. Yet the disaster could have been worse if the Slann had not staved off the complete destruction by sealing much of the rent in reality. A sacrifice that could only shrink the gap, but could neither close it nor stem the tide of magical energy that swept the planet as chaos spewed forth from the void. In the wake of the clouds of magic came the demonic legions of the Chaos Gods. They crystallized out of the swirling madness, materializing in numbers beyond measure. Each demon was a powerful facet of its master, an unnatural being that burned with the urge to destroy. And so the war for the mortal realm was begun. Faced with annihilation, the remaining Slann mustered Saurus armies of immense size, and while the demons attacked everywhere, the lizard men, as the most powerful civilization, bore the brunt of their attack. The Slann gulped down the now highly magic-saturated air to fuel spells of unprecedented destruction, and at first proved more powerful than even the most magically adept of the demons. However, as the chaos energies and unending reinforcements continued to flood into the world, the balance began to shift. As the chaos energies ebbed stronger, the Slann felt their spells growing harder to control, and even minute errors while manipulating these magical forces resulted in horrific mishaps. Minds being torn asunder, or the Slann being cast forever into the warp. The unconstrained winds of magic conversely invigorated the demons, and after 1,000 years of battle, only a handful of the temple cities stood, each protected by the greatest of the remaining Slann. The demons descended on Itza, sensing the final city was the linchpin of the Lizardmen's arcane defences, and under the protection of Lord Croak, first of all Slann spawned upon the world, and mightiest of the mages. A story we will tell in full soon. Across the globe, the younger races also faced the demon legions. Despite retreating to their mountain holds, the dwarfs had been decimated. The innocent elves of Ulthuan suffered tremendous losses, but in the end their mages enacted the Great Ritual, a spell that created a vast vortex that drained away the tides of magic that had flooded the world. Deprived of their lifeblood of magical energies, the demons disappeared back to their seething realm, but the world was irrevocably changed, now transformed into a world saturated with magic and mutated monsters. In this new age, the Slann soon discovered their abilities to use the remaining constructions of the Old One were fraught with danger, and they struggled to remember the rituals performed before the coming of chaos. The Great Cataclysm had a lingering effect upon their orderly minds. It clouded their consciousness and dimmed their memories. Over 1,000 years of warfare had passed, and there were no longer any slan of the first spawning to guide them. Of those that remained, there was not one that had entered the presence of an old one. Yet despite the fact they were but shadows of their former selves, the slan remained masters of the mystic arts, their arcane skills unsurpassed. Although the great rituals of the elves had driven much of the power of chaos away, it had not banished it entirely. The poles of the world still writhed under its corrupting sway, and the world still suffered an influx of its energies, ebbing and flowing in a patternless way. The slan identified the threats already seeking to undermine the elves' vortex at the centre of their island home. Were it to stop draining the world's magic, the demons would soon appear. Thus did the slan determine that what remained of the geomantic web was to be used to strengthen the Great Warding. A string of lesser siphons, defences and sentinels would keep the realm of chaos at bay and secretly lend its power to the vortex of the elves. In the following centuries, the people of Ulthuan set about restoring and extending the network of menhirs and obelisks that crisscrossed their island continent and all the continents of the world. The first of these lines of obelisks had been erected by the near-mythic Old Ones countless millennia before, as both a means of travelling across the world in an instant, and also manage the trickles of magic they had used to shape the world to their design, and first taught to the ancient slan and the elves. These various obelisks, referred to commonly as Waystones, lay upon fault lines in reality, either natural or somehow created by the interference of the Old Ones. The elves knew that etheric energy was already drawn to these ley lines, so the elves took it upon themselves to study and alter them, so that they would supplement the vortex they had created. In time, the dwarven kingdoms learned from the elves of the great vortex and the nature of the lines of etheric power that crisscrossed the world. Although still recovering themselves from the horrific predations of chaos, they saw the importance of draining magic out from the world. The dwarves used their own considerable understanding of how to bind magic to objects through runecraft to extend and improve the Waystone network. Thousands more Waystones across the world were erected along the existing ley lines, connecting to and enhancing those created by the Old Ones. In time, these hybrid lines of Old One, Elf and Dwarf arcane artisanship came to be the focus of the truly massive amounts of magical energy, and became integral to Ulthuan's vortex system. Without these cooperative efforts between the most ancient of the Old One's creations, it's very possible the tides of chaotic energy from the poles would have engulfed the old world long before the rise of mankind to any form of civilization. Much later, the savage tribes of humans that had begun to migrate across the old world came to believe that the Waystones, or Ogham as they referred to them, had been placed by gods and spirits. They erected their own crude standing stones in mimicry. Some early humans, sensitive to the flows of magic, erected these over existing lines of power or places contaminated by warpstone. Most of these, both ancient and recent, were endowed with great religious significance to the still barbarian tribes, and were often places of meeting, worship, and sacrifice. However, through these places, some of these humans with attunement to the winds of magic would begin on the path of using dark magic. High magic is not a thing in its own right, like any of the separate winds of magic. It is instead the process of weaving them in a balanced, focused, and safe way. Dark magic, or Dar, is usually the result of careless, instinctive, and grasping use of multiple winds of magic. Untrained, unknowing, or irresponsible magic users do not care or have the ability to weave Kriesh from the winds of magic. They may choose a more direct, immediate, and dangerous path for their spellcraft. Those who wield magic in this way do not simply sculpt and tweak the winds of magic. They grab and force them into the effect required through harsh and bloody-minded determination. Dark magic is wild and unpredictable, crudely drawing on the number of winds, often pulling in too much, and resulting in terrible and unexpected side effects. Spells of dark magic are potent, for they use all the available energy, but release a lot more unguided and partially activated magical residue into the material world. The side effects of this can manifest as summoning etheric entities, physical mutations, or psychological alterations. Dark magic can also form of its own volition, collecting in bleak places, near loads of warpstone or corrupted lands. It is this form that many of the orders of magic refer to it as True Dar. True Dar is the most terrifying and dangerous of all the etheric energy manifest upon the mortal plane. True Dar is not just the process of using the pure colours of magic in an unbalanced way. True Dar is best described as the result of all the colours of magic in a particular area merging together under the pressure of physical reality, coagulating and stagnating in a metaphysical sense. The most popular theory presented by the combined works of the Light and Gold colleges is that just as there are areas of the mortal world where the winds of magic cease to blow regularly, but where the Great Vortex of Ulthuan doesn't touch strongly enough, in these areas of isolation, the colours of magic slowly combine into immaterial pools. It is these areas where True Dar is thought to begin forming magical energy that has become trapped within particular parts of the mortal world, where it cannot leak out or be stirred up by either the Great Vortex or the etheric winds, and has lost its creative vitality. True Dar could be seen as etheric energy that smothers physical things, breaking them down into their component parts, only to crush them into a new form. While a mage may argue that mortal-engineered dark magic is no more evil than high magic is good, True Dar, on the other hand, could be seen as something that is almost entirely bent towards deconstructing, suppressing, and dominating physical things. By mixing dark magic with other winds, various darker methods of magic are produced, such as the results when Shaiish and other winds are blended to create necromancy. True Dar is said to flow like sluggish tar, and any being it is drawn to will have their minds and souls slowly drowned in its black and sticky depths. Where high magic is used with total tranquility of mind, an accurate sensibility of will, and focus of intention, and mortal created Dar is multiple winds of magic used without subtlety, but with determination and blind self-belief. True Dar is very different indeed. True Dar must be wrestled into shape, requiring supreme strength of mind, a megalomaniacal self-confidence, and an absolutism of will and purpose that only humans on the true borderline of insanity could ever hope to possess. Even the most sane and balanced person exposed long enough to the malign energy of True Dar becomes psychotic, self-obsessed, and completely uncaring of the fate of other living creatures. True Dar is said to be drawn to those beings who seek ill towards other beings or the world at large, and is used knowingly by only the most power-hungry or insane spellcasters, like the Drukhari, the Dark Elves, or perhaps the greatest practitioners of necromancy. True Dar most closely reflects Moorcroft's pure stuff of chaos, as described in Stormbringer, as a swirling, constantly changing, multicoloured matter with a power to melt and twist anything it comes into contact with, including living flesh. No mortal nightmare could encompass such a terrible vision. Every so often the ground heaved and erupted, and any beings unfortunate enough to be in the area were either engulfed and totally transformed, or had their bodies warped in indescribable ways. The noise was dreadful, a blending of human voices and roaring chaos sounds, devils wailing laughter, and quite often the tortured scream of a human soul who had perhaps relented his choice of loyalty and now suffered madness. So we see through this the inspiration for the warping and mutating power of chaos on both matter and flesh, as described in the creation of the various creatures of chaos and the physical environment of the chaos wastes that border the tear in reality that is the gateway to the realm of chaos. It is wrong to think of all practitioners of Da as inherently evil or corrupted. Druids and shamans existed alongside the demonologists and necromancers, but the increasing number of those tainted by its use led to the Wizards' War, and mostly being driven to the fringes of the Sigmarite Empire, outside of Middenhelm's melting pot of clerics, academics, and charlatans. For many centuries, the practitioners of magic were hunted down and killed, and rightly so, because they used energies beyond their understanding, bringing destruction and doom upon the heads of those around them. And this state of affairs persisted until the reign of Emperor Magnus the Pious. Finding himself in the midst of a conflict that later became known as the Great War against Chaos, Magnus the Pious chose to use the destructive abilities of human spellcasters. Lifting the unspoken ban upon wizardry, he accepted the aid of the High Mage Teclis, turning the tide of the war and changing the Empire forever. When Teclis and the Elven Archmages revealed the Aether was the Chaos Realm, their early students were deeply disturbed to learn they had in fact been playing with pure chaos, as their persecutors had so long claimed. Teclis assured his prodigies the nature and morality of magic is infinite shades of grey, rather than the simple black and white of religious dogma. He told them that manipulating the Aether's energy into spells was not in itself an evil act, or one that could serve the gods of chaos directly, but the risks of being seduced by the demon gods, or simply warped by the Aether's power, are more pronounced for those who utilize the power of chaos. Moorcock himself claimed this idea of good and evil came from Zoroastrianism, a multifaceted faith involving the dualistic cosmology of good and evil, and has an estology, a theology concerned with the final events of history, or the ultimate destiny of humanity, being the end of the world, or the end times. Crowley's Eight of Wands, with all its connections to the Warhammer setting, of course has a few more secrets. Firstly, if presented upright, as shown here, the card can mean fast-paced change and action. If presented reversed, it can mean frustration and the resistance to change. Tzeentch, Khorne, and Nurgle perhaps? And for Slaanesh, we need look no further than the symbol for Mercury, slightly rearranged and put at the same angle as the single arrow of the symbol for Sagittarius. And if you want more Slaanesh out of Crowley, you really don't have to look far. Who else used the single arrow symbol? Moorcock, to represent law. Towards the end of the original Elric novels, a vast chaos horde threatens to overthrow life on Earth completely. Everywhere they go, mutation and corruption are rife. The Chaos Army is a great tide of demons, mutants, armoured warriors and sorcerers, imbued with the power of chaos. Their flagship a mighty vessel with a massive 8-pointed star on its sail. The winds of magic blow strongly both in the time of the old world as we build towards the Great War against chaos, and in the setup for Warhammer 3, the storm of chaos that leads to the end times. The influence of Moorcock over all of the Warhammer narrative, and whether he and Games Workshop drew on Crowley's work either directly or the same original sources in ancient philosophy, theology, and mythology, we'll never know. But it's everywhere. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion of the origin and nature of magic in Warhammer, and that I've earned your sub today. And I'll see you again, in the near future, where there is only war.